Learn objects in JavaScript. At first, I will show you the example why we need objects. Let's start from variables. We will create an enemy and a hero. Both of them have health points and damage. And now let's create a function where both these units can fight. So I create a function battle, and here I decrease the HP of hero and HP of enemy. New hero HP equals to the current hero HP minus enemy damage. We also have a shorthand for that, which is just hero HP minus equal enemy damage. Now let's do the same with enemy. And finally, I want to log the result to the console. And now let's call this function. Now we see the result of the battle in the console. So now we see the result before the battle. So hero health is 100, enemy health is 50, and then the result after the battle. But what if we want to add a new hero or new enemy? So for example, let's add a new enemy. And now I must modify my function to add this second enemy. And now we see the result in the console. But do you see how many changes we need to do to just add a new enemy? This logic is the same. The logging logic is the same. I need to write very similar lines where the only change that we have is the data. So now let's delete it and let's try to do the same thing with objects. Let's create a hero object. I start absolutely the same as I declare a variable. And then to show that this is an object, I have to put curly braces. And now inside of the curly braces, I can add new properties. So let's add HP. And if I write in this way, you will see a warning that did you mean to use column? Because when we declare properties inside of the object, we use column instead of the equal sign. And in the end of this variable, I put comma. And now I can add a new property, for example, damage. If the property is the last one, we might leave the last comma. But I really recommend you to always put this trailing comma, because if you want to add a new property and if you leave this comma, you will see an error. And if you hover over this red wiggle, you will see that comma expected. Now let's add an enemy object. So I declare a new object, and here I can use the same names for the enemy properties. And we don't have any naming conflict, because if you try to access HP, and if you just type HP, it means that you have declared a variable somewhere outside of the object. And you must declare it in the global scope. Only in this case you can access HP. But to access HP from hero, you must write the parent's name, hero. Then you put a dot, and then Visual Studio Code gives you a list of all options that this object has. So for example, here I see HP. If I want to access the HP from enemy, I write the parent's name enemy. Then I put dot. And here I see a new list of all possible options. And eventually you see that you can differentiate both these HPs because the parent's name is different. And now let's also write the battle function, but instead of the hard coding all the possible variables inside of the battle, let's declare the attacker and defender parameters. And now I can write that the defender HP is minus equal attacker.damage. And then I can also log the result to the console. And now let's call this function. And now you see that we must pass attacker and defender arguments. The attacker is enemy and the defender is hero. And now you see the message that defender health is 85. So, but here we don't actually understand who is a defender. Let's also add a name property to both hero and enemy objects. And now in the battle function, instead of the writing defender, we can call defender.name. And now you see that we have hero health is 85 in the console. Now let's call the same function with other arguments. Now the attacker is hero and the defender is enemy. And now you see absolutely another message in the console that enemy health is 40. And now think how to create the same function with variables. It is possible, but the function will look like. Now you need to declare all these parameters separately. So this function will have 6 parameters. And now imagine how difficult to read this function when you have so many parameters. And the main disadvantage that if I want to add a new property, so for example, I add speed, in this case, I also must change the parameters of my battle. So somewhere here, I need to add hero speed. And then if I call this function in my code, I also have to add the speed there. So you add a lot of additional code that is very difficult to maintain. And for that, instead of passing all these properties separately, you add them in the group that calls object. And then you pass the entire group as attacker, defender, and then you can access these parameters directly inside of the function. So if I want to access the speed in the battle, all what I need to do is just add this line in the function. And that's it. I don't have to pass a new argument to this function. Now write a new object healer that has name, HP, and heal properties, and then write the function heal where the first parameter is a healer and the second parameter is a healed. So try writing it your own using the same code pattern as we used before. But now let's write it together. So let's start from the healer object. And now I write all these properties. So now instead of the damage property, I wrote heal property. And now right after our battle function, I add a new heal function with 2 parameters healer and healed. And now I need to increase the health of the healed by the heal of the healer. And then I also log the result to the console. Let's also delete the speed from the battle function. And now let's call the heal function. So the healer is the healer and the healed is our hero. And now we see another message that hero health is 90. Let's also heal the enemy. And now we see that this function works correctly. Now we stored only simple data types in the object, but we can also store functions. So for example, let's create a new function sound in our enemy object. I start from calling the name of this property, sound. And then I declare a common function, but I omit the name of this function because the name of this function is sound. And here I can write something like console.log and a sound. And now if I want to access this property, I can write enemy.sound. And I also must put parentheses if I want to execute this function. And now we see the sound in the console. Let's also put the comma after sound. Can you write the function regenerate that increases the health of this enemy by 5? Use the same pattern as for sound, but let's write it together as well. I start from the name of this property, then I declare a function, and now I want to access the HP of this enemy. So I can write enemy.hp. For this case, when you want to access properties from the same object, we have the keyword this. Instead of writing enemy.hp, I write this.hp. And now it refers to the HP in the enemy object. And now I can increase it by 5, and if I want, I also can log the result to the console. And you can write it as enemy health is plus this.hp, but in this case, if you change the name of this enemy, you also should change the name in this function. So let's declare this name dynamically. And now let's call this function. Right after my sound, I write enemy.regenerate. And now we see that the previous health was 45, and after the regenerate function, the enemy health is 50. In the next video, we will continue practicing with objects.